Hey,
Hey, how you doing? Can you see
good.
me?
How are you? All right. So,
Can you see
um,
me and can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay, great.
Can you hear and see me? Okay.
Yeah, everything's great. Hi, Chase.
Awesome. Hi.
How you doing?
So hi everyone. Thanks for being here and watching. Today we have someone really awesome and special in the Land Cruiser community, and that's Onur Azeri, and you might know him as his previous life as Beano, his mud handle from his parts procurement past. And today Onur has agreed to be here with us and talk about some of his history briefly, a little about Toyota, and then of course Land Cruisers, which that's the reason why we're all here. So thank you, Onur, for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with us
Sure.
about Land Cruisers as a whole. So how are you doing today?
Absolutely.
Just to
Thanks.
start off.
I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking. I actually have a 97 FZJ80 here, and I just finished doing a low gear set on the HF2A this morning in early afternoon, rebuilding that, and getting ready to stab it back in once I get off the call here. So this is a nice little break for me. I mean, I tried to clean up a little bit so I'm not all greasy, but yeah. So it's a solid Land Cruiser day for me. Thank you.
Nice. So I guess to start off, maybe a little background about yourself, so maybe some viewers that don't really know you or your past. But so, how exactly did you get into the world of Land Cruisers?
Um,
And a follow-up question: how did you end up working with, the famous sedan?
yeah. How did I get into Land Cruisers? I guess I got into Land Cruisers, kind of slightly by happenstance, really. I mean, I had always admired them. I remember seeing them, the old Mutual of Omaha a TV show in the 1980s. I recall very vividly seeing a Freeborn Red FJ60, or it probably was an HJ60, more likely. It was in Africa someplace, and most likely it was probably a diesel. Mid 80s, late 80s probably, and then yeah, I mean, I got my first Land Cruiser in the early 2000s, and I guess from there it was all over. I mean, I got myself a 1997 FCJ80 at that time, and yeah, as the saying goes, it kind of went from there. So, how did I get hooked up with Cruiser Dan? I was doing my PhD in the early 2000s in Ohio, and in 2004, my dissertation director died, unfortunately, of brain cancer, glioblastoma, which is a pretty notorious brain cancer. And by that time, I had already created a business relationship with Dan Busey, aka Cruiser Dan, buying parts from him at American Toyota in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And after my dissertation director passed away, I really had kind of lost my way with academics and really lost interest in academics, in academia in general. And one day I was talking to Cruiser Dan, and he said, you should move to Albuquerque and be a parts guy. And Valentine's Day of 2006 or 7, I think, I flopped my 80 series on I-77 in Cleveland, Ohio, and sitting there on the side of the road, I said, you know what? Let's do something different. And I sold all my belongings, donated all of my books from academia to Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio, and moved my life from Oberlin, Ohio to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Crazy.
Started working for Cruiser Dan, sweeping the floors, dusting the shelves, and learning about the Toyota system. So.
Yeah. Well, that's a great transition. I asked you about the Toyota part numbers. You have this ability to rattle off these 10, 12-digit part numbers like they're nothing, and I'm always in awe of that because I can never remember these part numbers. But have you always been good at remembering those long number strings, or is there like is the trick understanding the? I'm guessing there's a system behind each number and the family that it part it calls to.
Yeah, I mean, initially, of course, I was kind of like everyone else and looking at the numbers and not able to make complete sense of them until I really started delving into the different numbers and spending time with the parts day in, day out, hours and hours and hours at a time. And then, of course, the systematic of the system, I mean, the logic of the system becomes quite apparent. And then you basically, there's a lot of remembering just by repetition, doing front axle rebuild for parts for an 80 series or a 60 series or a 70 series, day in, day out, you really remember the numbers. And of course, the locational aspect becomes part and parcel to remembering the numbers. So you know that things that are in the chassis front axle start with 4s. Things that have to do with the transmission and transfer case start with 3s. Fuel injection, EFI start with 2s. Blocks, cylinder heads start with 1s, and throughout the entire system. Obviously, it's significantly much more in depth than that. Each position in a 10 or a 12-digit Toyota part number actually has a very specific meaning, both on the service part side, i.e., when you go to your Toyota dealership and order a part. In the actual catalog, they have a very specific meaning, the first 5 and the second 5. And then actually even back farther, the numerical system initially begins with an engineering drawing that is given a 10-digit Toyota part number for both the engineering purpose and then both for supplier procurement and then for factory installation. So all factory parts will be a 12-digit Toyota part number with the last 2 digits always being 00. Which indicates factory installation part. So when you go to any Toyota factory, all the parts bins will have a part number -00 to indicate that the part number is in fact a factory installation part. Then obviously all the Toyota suppliers also developed their own part numbering system that very much mimics Toyota's, where each number has a meaning, a corresponding meaning for the assembly or part that you're dealing with. So a lot of repetition, understanding the system, and then just years and years and years of doing it. I've been doing this now professionally for 15 years, almost 16 years. So, it really becomes almost just another language that you speak, just like a computer language. A computer software person has their own languages that they know, or a scientist has their own specific language, as you're a scientist. So, there's a specific language and nomenclature that allows you to be conversant in your area of expertise. So, to be a parts guy or to be anything associated with the engineering and manufacturer world, or even the parts and service world of Toyota, you need to know part numbers. It's just the byproduct of being associated in that world.
Yeah.
But
so, is that a kind of a dying skill? I've heard a lot of stories about parts guys at these dealers who they don't know. Maybe they're just not taking the time to understand, or kind of.
Well, yeah, I mean, as a vocation, no one really grows up and says, I want to be a parts guy, right? First off, most of the large corporate dealership groups, Lithia, Auto Nation and stuff, unfortunately, they really don't compensate parts guys very well. They really are, it's, I don't want to, it's just slightly above working at Walmart or Target, unfortunately. So there's no incentive for the parts guys to be professionals, really, or to learn. They're just sitting there inputting numbers. And most of them are not car guys. It's just a job for them. Most of them, unfortunately, probably don't have much interest in Toyota. Again, it's just a job. a lot of people, uh, and I don't want to generalize, but I think the skill set of really becoming a professional or an expert at something has been degraded in our culture. Expertise is seen as, you know, a negative factor, a feature, when in fact expertise really is the thing that allows us to define one skill set and allows us to do things in the world. Like you have to be an expert at something if you want to achieve success in your given field.
Yeah.
Being a placeholder is unfortunately what most parts guys are these days, and that's disappointing. And I'm talking generally. Of course, there are
Yeah.
a lot of there are a lot of really good parts guys that I know personally in my professional world, that I've gotten to know over the years. And they really are devoted, dedicated parts guys who have been doing it for years and years and years. Cruiser Dan was a parts manager for 33 years before he retired. Someone like Kurt Williams, the Cruiser Outfitters, while not a trained Toyota professional parts guy, he's very, very well conversant in the Toyota system, and he's been doing it for a long time. So,
Yeah.
and he is a true parts professional. So yeah, I mean, going to a dealership, you're probably 8 times out of 10 are going to experience or have a bad experience, unless you go in. And I always tell people, develop a relationship with your local Toyota parts dealership, and tell them that you really are interested in being educated when you come in and talk to them, so you can almost guide them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A Toyota parts guy will be like deer in a headlights, or will have a glazed look when you say, hey, I have a 1984, Canadian market DJ40, and they are completely blown away by what that even is, even though the American catalog will allow you to go in there and designate that as your delimiter to be able to look up those parts. The other thing that a lot of Toyota parts guys in departments don't understand is to use the information systems that are provided to them by Toyota. For example, Parts Master Information is a digital catalog that allows you to see parts depot availability. It allows you to see parts in transit from Japan. It allows you to see where all of the depots, for example, let's take the Toyota H55 5-speed transmission, 33O, 36O, 450 for 2F and 2H, 12HT applications. You put that in, you put that part number into parts information on the dealer side, and it'll bring up exactly dealer cost. It'll bring up the suggested wholesale cost. It'll bring up the Toyota manufacturer suggested retail price. It'll bring up all of the information about supplier, class codes, status codes, all sorts of internal information that allows you to gauge what the availability or your ability to source that part is. In the case of an H55, list price for a dealer is right around $2,000. MSRP is roughly, around $2,800 or $2,900. And right now there's probably 20 or 30 H55s in the United States. So if you go to a dealer and they're like, oh yeah, that part's not available in the US, because they're going to look it up and they're not going to see it as an available, they're not going to see it in their catalog as an available part for the US market FJ60 or 62. So they're going to throw their hands up, and the customer is going to be upset, of course, because they know from mud or social media that it's an available part. Like, there's dudes installing it all the time. So that's kind of disappointing. A lot of them don't want to do the legwork, especially when you come in and say, I have a 1984 BJ40 Canadian market Land Cruiser. It's just difficult. That's why Dan and I were quite successful in developing our business back, a decade or more ago, because we did have the skill set to look up that information. We did have the skill set to network our contacts within the Toyota system, to talk to parts analysts, to figure out super sessions, to understand the logic of the system and how you are able to see things like internal super sessions of part numbers, external super sessions, what status codes mean. All of these things are really good clues that allow someone to become a good parts a professional, really. And again, a lot of these skills aren't taught anymore.
Yeah.
Parts managers are seen as just bean counters, number crunchers to make sure that they're making as much money for the dealership as possible. You're only as good as your last month. You know, a lot of economics involved too. So,
Okay.
you know, we were lucky at American Toyota when Dan and I worked there that the Land Cruiser aspect of our business was incremental income. It wasn't sustaining income. The service department was our sustaining income. The Land Cruiser business was fun for us. You know, it was the best part of our day.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't have to deal with Camrys or Corollas or Priuses and those types of, you know, appliances.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I can honestly say, you know, that at least the U.S. Cruiser group is so, you know, they have to be all appreciative of your and Cruiser Dan's and the other, you know, smaller cohort of part experts. You know, your contributions have been, you know, it's easily seen just on the mud boards, you know, all these parts that, you know, people had no idea existed out there or that you could still get. You know, a lot of people can't find the part numbers and it's hard. So, you know, your contribution and the others have been so, you know, I can't understate how helpful they've been, I think, to, you know, the cruiser population in the U.S. and, you know, some, you know, in other parts of the world too. But
Thank you.
know,
I mean, I really, really, really always try as hard as possible on any social media site or public site to provide factual information that is true for that day and time in terms of availability or pricing or what it fits, how it fits. Because let's face it, there's a lot of crappy information out there, and nothing against social media or sites like I Hate Mud or your Facebook pages. There's a lot of opinion. 95% of it is wrong. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of disinformation. And there's just a lot of clueless people who have heard something through the grapevine that's generally not true. My dealer said it's not available. Well, your dealer, you weren't dealing with a parts professional, you were dealing with a button pusher, and the button pusher isn't interested in helping you. Yeah. That's why I've always said, support the cruiser professionals. That's the only way Land Cruiser parts are going to stay alive, is by buying more of them. That's the truth of the matter. And that's the only way. That's the only way Toyota suppliers operate, based on movement and sales. That's it. The more we buy, the more parts will stay alive. That's literally the bottom line. It's all economics. It's all bean counter stuff for Toyota. They have zero care about our nostalgia or love for Land Cruisers. They're interested in making money. And last quarter, Toyota had their best quarter ever. They sold insane amounts of vehicles, insane amounts of parts. They're interested in that. They want to sell parts. The more we buy, the more parts will still be available for your FJ40s, for your 60s, 62s. As you well know, as a 62 owner, it's tough finding parts for a vehicle that's now 30 plus years old.
Yeah. Someone asked if you had any recommendations for good Toyota parts dealers to deal with, or you know, maybe approaching their local Toyota dealer to get them on board with helping, you know, find these parts that are maybe take a little more effort.
Sure. Obviously, the internet has radically changed parts procurement for the end user. You know, in the 2020s, 15 years ago, there wasn't many online parts dealerships. You know, you actually had to pick up the telephone and make a call and talk to someone or send an email. You know, so obviously there's millions of online sources, online discounters, and really, unfortunately, for most people, it's a price game. And it's a race to the bottom when it becomes a price game. I'm going to be honest, most people don't pay for expertise, which is disappointing, because without experts, you're going to be SOL. You know, it's a race to the bottom. That's why Cruiser Outfitters, great source. Someone like George Esther at Valley Hybrids in Stockton, California, great source of parts and knowledge. I mean, there are, obviously you have your old school Spectre off-road, you have Cool Cruisers of Texas, you have Cruiser Core, you have many, many different cruiser specific companies that I think do a good job. There are also ones that do terrible job, and I'm not going to talk about it publicly, but there's, there are plenty of places where you can find out, do your due diligence and find out who does good work and who doesn't. Obviously, in terms of actual Toyota dealerships in the United States, try to develop a relationship with your Toyota dealership. Toyota South Atlanta, for example, in Morrow, Atlanta, does a pretty decent job. Kyle Edwards is the parts manager there. He, I believe, provides a Land Cruiser discount, and he's a reasonably knowledgeable parts guy, a professional. So that's a decent dealership to deal with. Let's see. Other dealerships, I don't really know. I mean, you really need to, talk to your local dealership. Dave Stedman, right. Dave Stedman, Japan 4x4 in Japan for your hard to find. If you want to deal with a professional who's been doing Land Cruisers a long time, David Stedman is a phenomenal resource in Japan for JDM parts and other hard to find bits and pieces. And then obviously you have your offshore websites. You have places like Amayama, Parts Ook. There's a million of them, and you are dealing with a lot of outfits now who are based in the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, which are your Middle Eastern countries in the Gulf. Amayama, I believe, is based out of Russia or possibly Hong Kong or Indonesia. I don't know, but there is a lot of counterfeit stuff. I would say that a good portion of your stuff that you buy on Amazon or eBay is counterfeit. The Chinese can pump that stuff out all day. That looks kind of like a Toyota part number label. It kind of looks like Toyota font, but it's very simple for someone who's been dealing with Toyota parts to pick out counterfeits. So, those are some people. I mean, I love dealing with Kurt and his team over Cruiser Outfitters, doing great work for years and years and years. Slee Off-Road. I mean, there are just a lot of really, really good outfits out there. Oh, I'm sorry. Brandon, Classic Cruisers, for all your used stuff. Man, what a great outfit Brandon and his team have there. Brandon Bonneville. So, you really do have a lot of good options out there. I always recommend trying to develop a relationship that's beneficial to you and the projects and the trucks that you have. The better relationship you have with your parts professional, the more happy and satisfied you're going to be with your experience, just like anything else out there. When I was doing parts, I always told people, I'm not for everyone. Find the people that you like to work with and develop a relationship with them. There are plenty of people who didn't like dealing with me because I sometimes came across as a jerk or whatnot. That's just, that's just, I'm not for everyone. And I'm still currently to this day, I'm not for everyone, in terms of the mechanical work or the consulting that I do with parts and technical stuff. But I enjoy the relationships I have with my clients. They're long-term. I mean, I've been dealing with some people since my first day working at American Toyota 15 years ago. So to this day, I'm dealing with them, and I love working with them. So relationships are important. Knowledge is important. Expertise is important. Those are things that I think people should keep in mind if they are inherently dedicated and committed to having basically a cult vehicle. And a lot of these vehicles are really old now.
Yeah.
You need help. Real help.
To get back to what we were talking about earlier about understanding the system and, the contributions of these few parts people to the community. And, one product or one part find that stands out to me that you contributed to the community that I'm not sure a lot of people understand, that I'm pretty sure as you had discovered this, was the Toyota branded headlight upgrade that Koito made for them with the harness included for like $30.
Yeah.
I think that blew a lot of people's minds. I mean, how did, that was one product that stood out for me that you were able to, find to bring to the community. And I think it really shows the power of that, when you understand the part system, the kind
Yeah.
of cool Easter eggs you could find.
So yeah, 81110 60 Papa 70 is the part number, and that's the 7-inch round headlight Koito H4 bulb. You get a harness, you get nice dielectric grease with it, you get zip ties, you get wonderful relays, 12-volt setup, obviously. So I was looking, the headlights for FJ40s became discontinued recently. I want to say 2.5 years ago. You used to be able to buy them in a box. They were usually Stanley or GE bulbs, and they were the sealed ones. So you got the whole headlight assembly with the 3 prongs on the back. And it got discontinued. I'm like, how the heck did they discontinue headlights for an FJ40 or a 60 or a 70 series? I mean, that's insane. Or even other vehicles that had 7-inch round headlights. So that really upset me. I started searching just different part numbers, 90981 headlight part numbers, basically. So 90981 is the prefix 5-digit number for headlight assemblies and bulbs, basically. So I started putting in hundreds of different numbers, both 12 volt and 24 volt, going through different catalogs. And finally, I found this weird internal supersession that had not popped up before. And it's a tree. So when you put in a part number into a parts master, the supersession shows, it says, is there a supersession? Yes. You click the yes, and it shows this tree that shows interchangeability information as well as supersession information. And I found this number. I said, 81110. That's really odd, because 81110 actually ends up being like a headlight assembly that you would find like on an 80 series or a 100 series, not a bulb. So I said, okay, what the heck is this? So I ordered it. It came in, and I was just like absolutely blown away. It was really an incredible find. And that's when I posted it up and explained the logic behind the part. It's stupid cheap, beautifully Japanese made. The harness is incredible. And along those lines, I actually found a new one, 81110 90 kilo 00, 90K 00, which is the same thing, except it actually comes with the metal frame that the headlight goes into, which
Wow.
is incredible, and comes with the chrome ring around it and the screws.
Wow.
But you are not able to get that in the US. It has to come from offline. So
Okay.
the 90K 00 indicates for the 70 series line.
Okay.
So it's technically a replacement for all 70 series trucks previous to the body change, the front headlight body change in 2007. So yeah, that was a new
That's
one
cool.
that I found. So I ordered one of those, and that came in recently, and it's a sexy part. I mean, really stupendous. I mean, really top notch. And I also recently found in Japan cool Denso 24 volt relays, so people can actually pull the relays from the harness that comes with the 81110 60P70, and you can actually then have it applicable for 24 volt systems.
Wow.
So, which is really cool for people with 24 volt electrical systems. That was pretty much par for the course through the mid 1990s on all Land Cruisers that were non-US application. So that was a really cool find. Yeah, I mean, those types of things are really awesome. I mean, it's a lot of aha moments. Another recent one that I found was that Toyota upgraded knuckle studs, for example, to used to be 90126 12005, which was the knuckle stud with the Torx head, basically. And Toyota recently superseded that to 90126 12010, which is actually slightly longer and has thread sealant that is factory applied, which is really cool, because obviously they did, which Toyota's great at doing, Genshi Genbutsu. Go look and see what were the problems. Many people with the solid front axle were reporting that the knuckle studs would back out after being pounded for long periods of time, especially the Australians. So Toyota, went back and talked to their hardware supplier. They said, well, we're obviously having an issue. One thing we'd like you to do is lengthen it by a couple of millimeters, and let's apply thread sealant to it. So it actually saves a process step when the end user is applying the bolt back into the knuckle. So you actually save a step, and it's one less step you have to do in terms of applying thread sealant or locker to the stud.
Cool.
Yeah.
Someone asked if you could repeat the part number for that new knuckle stud.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's 90126 12010.
Thanks.
Yeah, and that's applicable for all. Well, except for that small period of time where there were those weird 11 millimeter studs, but it's all for the 12 millimeter, the M12 studs for all solid front axle Land Cruisers is now the new number. There is also, it's a stud, cone washer, flat plate washer, and then you have your lock nut that goes on there. The lock nut comes now as a supersession, so it's a combined supersession, and the Toyota actually got rid of the washer, and you actually have a flange nut, which is kind of cool as well too, that you can utilize as well too. And that flange nut also comes with a sealant as well, which is cool. So this was applicable roughly on 70 series trucks, starting with the added power of the 1VD FTV that was introduced in 2007. So when the frame was widened, and the axle housing also had to be widened in 2001 of 2007.
Okay.
So applicable,
Cool.
but reverse applicable for all solid axle trucks.
Okay. So one more question about parts, and we can move on.
Sure.
But maybe it's an easy one. But is there any part that stood out so far in your history that's been maybe the most exciting part you found, or what's the biggest surprise? Maybe that something was still available.
Oh yeah. So I'm working with a great client of mine, and we have two really spectacular builds that I'm consulting on, technical and parts consulting on. And we were able to find, this is mainly because I've never seen these parts before. We were able to find two factory long blocks. So a factory long block would be your entire short block assembly, all rotating assembly, interior, the cylinder head, the head cover, camshafts, all of that stuff. And one was a 1HD FTE, which is a 24 valve fuel-injected turbo diesel electronically controlled FTE, which was put into HDJ 100s and HDJ 78 and 79 vehicles from 1998 through 2007. We found that in the Middle East, and it was such an incredible work of art to find a new old stock long block assembly in a crate that arrived from FedEx on an airplane. And I actually flew out to where this long block arrived to because I needed to see it. There was no way I was going to order a factory long block, something I've never seen before in any iteration, and I was not going to see it. So I flew out and assisted in opening the crate and looking at it. It was just insane. And obviously it was very expensive. Anything with Land Cruisers is basically pay to play. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. But because new long blocks are only available for the first 6 months of production of any new engine iteration, because Toyota basically figures that they can get all the kinks worked out within the first 6 months.
Okay.
So, and dealers don't stock things like that. So depots do sometimes, and there are some new old stock things like that. So being able to find one, let's see, the one at HD FTE, the last one that was put into a vehicle was 12 of 2007. To find one 14 years later was pretty impressive. The second one was a factory long block 1FZFE direct ignition engine, sans distributor, again for the same client. And I have not seen this one yet personally, but 1900 66 120 is the part number for that one. Again, that was a new old stock. I mean, the last time that was placed into an engine was 15 years ago, into a 70 series, or an FCJ 100 or an FCJ 105. I'm looking forward to seeing that at some point too, and that's a really cool special project that I'm working on as well too. But that's an epic engine, mainly because we never received it here. It was introduced into non-US Land Cruisers starting in 1998, and it ups the horsepower of the 1FZFE and really provides super smooth acceleration. It basically puts it on par with the 2UZFE.
Wow.
Yeah. And obviously, as people well know, I mean, you can do so many cool upgrades to a 1FZ to get gobs and gobs of power. I mean, the Arabs are pushing 1,000 horsepower. Australians, are putting it into Holdens and putting it into Holdens and pushing 900 horsepower and things like that. So, a great engine. The 1HDFTE was an incredible find, another great engine. But for example, you can get a 1HZ long block today from Toyota in the United States if you wanted to. If you had the right ability to procure it from a Toyota dealership, you can get that. 1900 17840 is the part number. Brand new 1HZ long block. They're out there. It's available. You just got to find it. And you got to find someone willing to get it for you.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Those
are some amazing finds.
Those are my two favorite finds. I mean, really just spectacular parts. And both of those come from a Toyota supplier called Toyota Industries Corporation, which is the original Toyota Loom manufacturer. And Toyota Industries manufactures all of the very large displacement engines for Toyota.
Okay. Wow. So speaking of, special projects, you've somewhat recently started a new business venture, Tabasco Land Cruisers. And,
yeah,
I was really excited to see that because, following your threads on mud, your work is really, at the level of an art, how methodical and clean it is, and how, you follow that factory service manual and that Toyota mindset. And so, I was really excited to see that you started this new business venture. And so,
thank you.
How's that going? Stepping away from the parts and, aviation, and then getting into a little more in depth with the Land Cruisers.
Yeah. So, it's been really good. I had, after I got married in 2018, but I moved from Colorado to New York in 2018 and got married. I wanted to have a bit more of a stable thing, and I went into commercial aerospace, working for a French multinational, doing process improvement and things like that on line maintenance stations globally. So I was working around big planes and doing cool things like that. And then COVID hit last year, and my division went from 2,000 people to 500 people, which sucked. And a large portion of us were all laid off. Yeah. Commercial aviation hasn't come back and wasn't planning on coming back. And my wife and I talked about it. I said, I think I want to do Land Cruisers again. Like, that's just really where I feel the best, the happiest, the most fulfilled, the most challenged. It just makes sense to me. So, yeah, Tabasco Land Cruisers started that up. I live in a little hamlet in upstate New York in the Catskill Mountains called Tabasco, New York, of all places. And when you Google map it, literally the dot of the hamlet falls right on our property, which is kind of cool. Where we bought our house. So it made sense to have that name. Kind of cool. And it's been great, man. The response has been really spectacular. When my old time clients all heard that I was back into doing work with parts and consulting and technical and now mechanical, people lined up pretty quickly. And I've got some really cool projects going on right now. Some very long-term projects, some, more short-term projects, and being in the Catskill Mountain region, it's a very popular second home area for folks from New York City and northern New Jersey. A lot of those folks end up wanting to have like a cool car in this area, and a lot of people are getting Toyota Land Cruisers. So in that regard, and there is definitely a dearth of a quality, respectable Toyota Land Cruiser repair facility in the Northeast. Well, in at least the tri-state area of the Northeast. So New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, this kind of area. So the response has been great. Lots of people have reached out, and in all honesty, I'm turning away a lot of work right now, mainly because I'm just a one-man operation. I am just me, myself, and me. I have a lot of long-term clients that I handle very consistently that basically keep me on retainer. I travel for work for people who need me to come do projects, look at projects, develop sort of very similar to program management, project management types of situations. So the entire spectrum. I have a good group of suppliers near me for a lot of the things that I need and the things that I do, obviously. But my real specialty is doing really, really specific OEM style builds. If someone comes and says, "Hey, man, I bought parts from Rock Auto and stuff like that," I'm just not interested in working with parts from Rock Auto. It's just not going to happen. I have very specific parameters of how I operate. And I'm doing this to make myself happy and to make my family happy and to make my clients happy. And doing that, I work with only the best products. I only work with the best parts. And I'm very methodical about how I operate. So, I've got 2 engine conversions currently happening. I've got a 1HZ long block that we're building, made it to an H55 and a rebuilt split case that we are doing into a swap into a BJ74. The BJ74 has been, the engine's pretty beat at this point, so we'll be putting a new H55 33030 60850, which has the correct input splines, input shaft for 1HC 1HDT, and that's going into a BJ74 for a good client of mine from Vermont. And then I have an FJ62 coming from out west, ironically, soon, and we are doing a 1HDT complete long block rebuild as well. Wow. Too. Made it to an H55 in a split case as well, and that's going to be happening again real shortly. What I'm doing right now is I'm building the drivetrains so that the owners of those vehicles can enjoy their vehicles as long as possible before they send them to me, and then I'll be working on doing the integration and conversion at that time. Okay. I have a really nice HZJ77 long-term project for a client of mine who is in the U.S. military and deployed currently. And he'll be back, I believe, in a month or so, and I'm excited to be able to get that vehicle to him. We're doing all sorts of cool interior stuff and a nice mechanical refresh. We're putting a new H55 and a rebuilt split case in that as well, too. I think he's really going to be stoked when he gets back from being abroad for a year and has a really awesome patina HCJ77 to work with. I've got an H55 conversion on a really nice FJ62 that I'm doing here. And I've got some, smaller jobs kind of creeping in here or there. I'm like I said, today I'm doing a low gear set on an 80 series transfer case, HF2A transfer case, and rebuild on that as well, too. So after I get off the phone, I'll go stuff it back into the FCJ80. And that'll be picked up today. And, so things like that, I've got a few clients who want me to build heads or build engines and put them on a pallet and ship them and things like that. I'll be traveling out west during the summer here for a few days to go assist some clients in Colorado and other places with both mechanical and project management types of endeavors. So I love it, man. It's just, I got to be honest with you, it's much better than being in the corporate world.
Well, I'm really happy for you. That's awesome. That sounds
Thanks,
great.
Chase.
And you seem really happy, so.
Yeah, I am. I've had some medical issues recently and things like that, and I'm just real grateful that, I've got a super supportive client base who were really cool about the fact that I was down for a couple of weeks and stuff. And, you know, I've got a super, super supportive wife who's also a cruiser head as well, too, a cruiser chick, I guess is the terminology now. And she's very supportive of all of the things that I do. And she loves, I mean, that's how we met, was through cruisers, and she loves cruisers. And, you know, so I'm real grateful, and I'm just real happy. You know, it's tough being in New York when a lot of my friends are located all around the country. You know, you're in Seattle. I've got friends all around the country, and in the South and in the West. And, you know, so it's you know, being able to parlay my love for cruisers allows me to travel and engage with people. And that's really, you know, that gives me a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm real happy about that.
So that ties in nicely. The next question, I guess, is, you know, thinking about your career and how long you've been with Toyota Land Cruisers, have you observed any large shifts in, you know, the culture around Land Cruisers, or is it pretty much, you know, same as kind of always, but, you know, kind of getting at there?
I mean, there've been, it seems, let me put it in a two-pronged sort of way. In the past, when there wasn't so much of an influence of social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you know, I Hate Mud, you know, Expedition Portal, other places as well, it seemed as though the patterns of ownership and people coming in was a much more subtle, gradual type of an experience and a change. And the community morphed and changed slowly, I think. But with the influx of social media and exposure, I mean, radical shifts, in my opinion, have been occurring in the cruiser community, both in terms of the sheer magnitude of people coming into the Land Cruiser community, be it from other vehicles, you know, Jeeps or Rovers or Blazers or Broncos or whatever they were into, or just completely new into even the off-roading and mechanical, or even the ownership of a cult vehicle kind of thing, where, you know, I think a lot of people, especially people I think who are in their late 20s or early to mid 30s, who've been in a career maybe for about 10 years and have gotten some disposable income, because as we know, cruisers are not cheap at all. Anyone tells you otherwise is lying to you. You know, I think there's a phrase at the end of a really cool 50th anniversary Land Cruiser Heritage book that Toyota made, I believe, or it was made in Japan, but written in Japan. But I believe it says that, you know, there's a certain amount of integrity and maturity that you have to come into a relationship with a Toyota Land Cruiser, and it's not for everyone. And you know, the care and feeding of a Land Cruiser as it gets older will only increase in price. It does not decrease in price. It only increases in price, you know, in terms of the money that you spend. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of people coming into Land Cruisers who are, you know, a lot of folks have diamonds in their eyes. They're like, see this sparkly, shiny object. And I think a lot of people get disappointed when they get a rusty hunk of junk. And they're like, oh my God, I paid 20 grand for this and it's a piece of crap and I have to put another 40 into it to make it reliable. You know, so I think that people coming into the cruiser community now are seeing cruisers as a part of their lifestyle, or want to integrate cruisers into a part of their lifestyle. For good or for ill, I'm not trying to make a value judgment about that. But yeah, there's definitely a, you know, the Brover landing and overlanding. I mean, it's become very, very ubiquitous and popular to get a vehicle like this, you know, spend $30,000 throwing a bunch of stuff on it and still being quite uneducated about both the vehicle and the experience that they're engaging in. So, you know, that's been a pretty radical shift. Yeah. In terms of the people coming in. I mean, I recall when I came into the Land Cruisers community, I spent a lot of time just reading, like really, really reading, and trying to figure out what it is I actually bought. And is this really what I wanted? And am I really ready to be in a relationship with a vehicle that is globally considered both a cult vehicle and considered one of the best and most, I mean, one of the most incredibly mass-produced vehicles ever made by any company. So there's that burden that comes with owning a Toyota Land Cruiser. And I think that a lot of people don't take it seriously. I take it seriously. I know you take it seriously. There's a lot of people who have their entire lives around Toyota Land Cruisers and their families, and they get married in cruisers. And I got married in front of my cruiser, my wife's cruiser, and you know, was wearing my TEQ hat, and you know, so. But for other people, and that's okay. For other people, this is a passing hobby, you know,
Right.
You know, and maybe in a couple of years they'll be into something else, and that's totally acceptable too. So I'm not trying to, again, make a value judgment about that. Then there are people who are basically in it to have financial gain and to monetize
Yeah.
a Toyota Land Cruiser. So flippers, people coming in and being like, you know, I'm going to buy a cruiser for $6,000, put $10,000 into it, and sell it for $30,000. That aspect of it has gotten really insane, obviously, with the proliferation, you know, the proliferation of things like Bring a Trailer, eBay, all of your different auction sites, Mud, and that aspect of it has gotten really, really interesting. And, you know, I have mixed feelings about it. I really like the days 10 years ago, you can pick up an 80 series, $5,000, and for 20 you were doing the Rubicon, you know, I mean, really, or for even less than that. You're not even getting an 80 series for less than 15 or 20 these days. And most of the time they're a piece of shit. You know, they're junky craps, you know, crappy trucks out there. There's a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of junk coming from South America. What a lot of people don't realize is that the South American countries, actually, they didn't, you know, a lot of the vehicles were not imported from Japan into South America. They came as CKDs, complete knockdown kits. So basically adult erector sets that showed up in big crates on a boat and were manufactured with local parts, things like Dana axles and weird glass and other things in local environments. You know, South American trucks, for example, that are coming into the United States are generally pig on lipstick. You know, lipstick on a pig, excuse me. You know, a lot of them are. I'm not saying all of them are. You know, you have obviously, you know, companies like FJ Company that are doing really high-end bespoke builds and whatnot. And but most of the ones coming from South or Central America, you know, if you're buying it, it's probably been put together pretty jankily. You know, it's kind of they're janky trucks, baling wire and lots of Bondo. And so I always tell people to be careful about those types of things. And I think the proliferation of those types of vehicles has diluted the value of good iterations of Land Cruisers. And that's unfortunate sometimes. Like I said, there's a lot of janky trucks being sold out there that are really crappy. And unfortunately, a lot of people are spending a lot of money on them and unfortunately end up being disappointed. You know, I always say, do your due diligence, do your homework. If you're going to spend $30,000 or $40,000 on a truck, don't do it without buying a $250 plane ticket and flying and checking it out. Like, do it. Like, don't just buy it and have it delivered to your house, and then you're like, oh my God, I just made a $50,000 mistake. You see that on Mud all the time. You know, so there's a lot of that going on. You know, Joe Rogan and his 80 series that got a lot of press and whatnot. So a lot of things going on, a lot of things changing. Again, some for good, some for not so good, not so positive types of things. You know, there's a lot of sketchy people who are now into Land Cruisers who don't have any idea about Land Cruisers. They're just sort of selling a widget. You know, remember a Land Cruiser is still a used car, and most people selling them are used car dealers. That's it. Think about it that way. Okay. Do your due diligence, educate yourself, interview the person selling the vehicle. Do they have any idea about what they're selling? Do they have good answers for the types of questions that you're asking? You know, but other than that, obviously you see generational shifts. You and I kind of came into Land Cruisers roughly, you know, same time. And, you know, we were a generational shift from the people from the 1980s and 90s who had been, you know, Chevy 350s and TPIs and, you know, into FJ40s that were, you know, sprung over on 35 with Skyjacker lifts and bashing on the Rubicon. So lots of things change, and these things will continue to change. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's really one thing that's always fascinated me about Land Cruisers and watching them, you know, their value increase to the level of, you know, more classic vehicles when you think about Porsches. And, you know, those cars, it kind of makes sense because they started out as a luxury item and they've just gotten fancier. But Land Cruisers, you know, in the U.S., not as much in the U.S., but other parts of the world have always been just a tool. You know, it's an end to a mean to get where you need to go. It's tough. And then they're kind of getting put into this weird arena with classic cars.
Yeah.
And so then you get this weird dynamic, like you're saying, you know, that these old beat up versions, you know, they did their job, but now they're being thrown in a classic car arena. And you get that broad spectrum of people, which I love that you get that broad spectrum of people, but it's definitely, I feel like the culture is, I don't know, trying to adapt to that shift. It is interesting to see how it's changing, you know, just because the Land Cruiser was, you know, in most markets, not a luxury vehicle. It wasn't a Porsche.
It's an appliance.
You know, it was a common man's truck, you know, as a tool. Even in the U.S. in the early days, same thing. So,
yep.
Yeah, it's a strange dynamic, and I love that about the Land Cruiser. But you know, I think it's
just like with anything, there's positives and negatives. I mean, any community, any tribe is going to have a spectrum and a range of members, and I mean, I fully accept everyone and everyone's reason. I don't negatively view anyone's reasoning for getting into Toyota Land Cruisers, as long as it's, you know, there's very little authenticity in the world. As long as it's authentic, I think then, you know, as long as there's love behind it, as cheesy as that sounds, I'm a big Grateful Dead head. So, I mean, you know, without love and a dream, you know, nothing will ever come true. And I think there's a lot of truth to that with Land Cruisers. So, you know.
So I guess we'll talk about a little bit, I guess, Toyota as a whole. And so maybe put on your prophesizing hat for a second. But, you know, now that Toyota has come out and said that they're going to, well, you know, they're not going to have the Land Cruiser branded version of the 300 series here in the U.S.,
right?
And just have a fancier Lexus version. Do you think that is some kind of canary in the coal mine for other Land Cruisers in different markets? You know, I don't know how the 70 series fits in with their future branding now that, you know, they're even stepping away just from the Land Cruiser brand in the U.S. and just focusing on Lexus.
Right.
Do you have any future ideas of kind of what they're thinking, or?
You know, I mean, I have a lot of friends from my dealership days who are still associated with Toyota, and then I have friends within the corporate realm of Toyota in Plano, Texas, that I communicate with. You know, obviously, you know, Toyota as a corporation, as a company, as a conglomerate, is under radical change right now. They are very much in a redefinition of what it means to be a car company, or if even a car company will even exist in 50 years as what we think of it. Toyota has always been a long-term company. They don't do anything haphazardly. Everything is engineered. Everything is codified. There's nothing arbitrary about what they do. They are already thinking, I mean, product planning cycles, you know, the 300 series was already being developed 4 to 5 years ago. So, I mean, product planning cycles are 3 to 5 years, though they're trying to shorten product planning cycles, and engineering planning and manufacturing planning and things of that nature, procurement planning. And you're going to see that shift decrease with a lot of the changes that are happening within the Toyota group, as well as the Toyota Keiretsu, which is their grouping of companies and suppliers, both in Japan, you know, both in Japan and globally. I mean, Toyota now is a massive global, you know, corporation with manufacturing operations on 6 continents, with, well, actually no longer Australia, but, you know, 5 continents, with, you know, vehicles sold in almost every single country on the planet. Toyota is making a radical change toward becoming a mobility and a technology, information processing technology company. Like every company, they're realizing that information and its manipulation and data is really what is going to drive the next 100 years of human experience. That's reality now at this point. And everyone to a certain degree has accepted that. All business entities have accepted that big data is where it's going to be for the foreseeable future to make important decisions for both product planning, marketing, sales, all of that stuff at the very large level. Toyota is no longer the Toyota that made, an FJ40 or even an FJ60 or even an FZJ80 or even a 100 series. I mean, the 100 series was designed in the 1990s. Think about that. The last 100 series came out in 2007, 14 years ago. The 300 series, obviously, it's going to be a twin turbo V6. It's going to have a V6 diesel, a newly developed diesel. They're still keeping the 1GR-FE V6 diesel. I mean, a gas engine that's been around since the early to mid 2000s in the Tacoma, the 4Runner, and the FJ Cruiser. Actually, in the Tundra as well too, the base model Tundra. That's going to be the base model 300 series. That's going to go to probably the NGO market. It's going to go to the UN market. It's going to go to government and military market. Base model standard, your GX grade. And then it'll go up from there. In the United States, will we see a Land Cruiser? I would not be surprised if we see something named a Land Cruiser or of its lineage and heritage in the United States at some point in the future. When that will be, I don't know. I mean, again, a lot of this is marketing. A lot of this is building up demand. I mean, again, Toyota is a very, very, very smart company. They're not, none of this was, let's discontinue the Land Cruiser. This was designed well in advance of the release of the 300 series. And it's obvious from the sales of 200 series LX570 vehicles that a market doesn't exist when you only are selling 3,000 vehicles in the United States. I mean, that's at the level of like Bugattis, and I mean that's what Bugatti sells globally. So a 3,000 people buying a Land Cruiser doesn't make a market. But let's be realistic about it. Toyota makes gobs of money on the Land Cruiser, gobs and gobs and gobs of money on a Land Cruiser, more so than an appliance like a Corolla or a Prius that are manufactured at the rate of 50,000 a month for the U.S. market in Mississippi, at the Tupelo plant. So the Land Cruiser, I think it's going to come back. I've talked to a lot of my friends sort of in the know.
Yeah.
At what point? I don't know. In what version of it? Will it be a dedicated base model off-roader? I probably doubt that it will be something like that. It definitely will not be something powered by a diesel engine. You have to realize that the American market is a first world market. It's not the Africa market or the GCC market or the Australasia market. It's not those places where you have vast expanses of land with no services, and where the Land Cruiser is really a work truck, is an appliance, is something that allows people to live in their day. So I think that we're going to see some version of a Lexus probably at some point here. I'm sure we're going to see a hybridization of the Land Cruiser at some point here. I'm sure Toyota is still working out the specifics of how that vehicle will appear, both from the point of view of the platform, which is going to be TGNA, Toyota Global New Architecture system that they have now developed for the modularization of both manufacture and implementation of new products.
Okay.
So, I'm no longer looking internal in the United States for my Land Cruiser fix. My future Land Cruisers will most likely all be imported into the United States at this point.
Yeah.
Now with the, I'd love to get an HCJ70 short wheelbase factory soft top. I'd love to get like an FZJ74 left-hand drive soft top. Obviously, my holy grail is either an HCJ or FCJ 105, which is your best of the both worlds. And I think for a lot of people is going to be like the next vehicle that's going to blow away people, because that vehicle is coming up 2 years left, I think, before it's, or 3 years left before it becomes applicable for import into the United States from places like the GCC, South Africa, and the Australian market.
That's awesome. That'll be an exciting development.
Yeah, barn doors, base model, steel wheels, full float reel, cloth seats. It's gonna be epic. Yeah, that's it, man, right there.
That is cool. Yeah, I know. Having the U.S. market 100, I can only imagine how much better the the more stripped down version is.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can build a 105. I mean, you could take a 100 and you could really build one if you want from parts. All the parts are still available, but you're looking at $100,000 endeavor.
Yeah,
for real. If you wanted to build it via OEM using all OEM parts, at least 50, maybe 100's probably a little high, but maybe, but easily 50 grand.
Wow. All right, maybe we'll wait till the used ones come on the market.
Yeah, the used ones come in. Exactly, I agree.
So I guess tying into the change in the Land Cruiser mindset with Toyota, to touch on the parts environment. I've seen you mention this before on Mud, how Toyota seems to be changing its part numbering, kind of holding environment in their thinking behind parts, and how that relates to the amount of live part numbers they have, and kind of what do Land Cruiser owners, what should they take away from that change? I mean, should we be really scared? Especially for the older.
I mean, if you own an FJ60 or an FJ62, you're going to be SOL soon with parts. You're driving a 2F, you're going to be SOL soon with parts, at least from Toyota.
Yeah.
I mean, let me caveat that. Toyota has always looked for ways to reduce inventory. Toyota has always looked for ways to reduce the number of parts that they have live. And as the new modularization architecture is coming online, there is a new part numbering world being introduced internally at Toyota, both at the engineering and supplier level, which will then filter into the service parts, which is what we deal with. Toyota considers parts that are sold at a dealership to be service parts. So whenever you go to your Toyota dealership, you're not buying a spare part, you're buying technically a service part, because you're servicing your vehicle. They're not looking at restorations, they're looking at servicing. Yes, that reduction in part numbers, there usually is internally at Toyota a part number reduction committee. That's generally done at the global level, out of Nagoya, out of Toyota City, at the parts in the engineering and procurement department division, excuse me. And there always have consistent committees that are looking at reduction in part numbers, live part numbers. That usually occurs via supersession. So instead of having 7 different part numbers that are 90201 or a 90210 plate washer, let's say a 90201 12050, which would be a plate washer for the exhaust manifold studs for a 2F, the 2 center ones that are there before your lock nut. That part number is actually a supersession of 3 or 4 different plate washer part numbers over the years, but from the F to 2F to, I'm sorry, F and a half to 2F part numbers, and it got codified and stabilized at 90210, 90201, 12050. That'll happen a lot more. So that happens. So they'll take 4 or 5 different part numbers that, let's say we're on a Corolla, a Camry, an Avalon, a Highlander, and a Land Cruiser, and they'll supersede them all to one part number and then make them applicable to all the different vehicles, basically. Okay. This happens especially with hardware part numbers. So your semi-standard part numbers, standard and semi-standard part numbers are vehicle part numbers that are applicable across all manufacturing lines and products. So you'll see things like that. And the fact of the matter is that there are bean counters, hundreds of them, in fact, in Nagoya, in Plano, Texas, in Brussels, Europe, for Toyota Europe, who are sitting there, and all they do is look at spreadsheets and movement of parts. Movement means sales within a given month, sales within a given 6-month period, sales within a given 12-month period. Toyota has internal parameters. If it falls below, Toyota will just say, hey, there's no reason for us to have Aishin build vacuum actuated split cases, 36110s, when there is no need for them, because the last time a vacuum actuated split case was put into a Land Cruiser was, let's say, 2000. No one's buying them anymore. There's no reason for Aishin to make those. So the procurement people will call up Aishin Seiki procurement people and say, hey guys at Aishin, we are going to discontinue this part number. We need you to phase out the part, basically. And okay. Aishin will stop making that part after they phase out whatever their production run for that month is, generally, or for a 3-month period. Parts procurement for Toyota is very, very fluid. Generally speaking, Toyota parts suppliers are given a 30-day production plan. So they are, generally speaking, making parts 30 days in advance. That's it.
Wow.
They will then receive 14-day production plan requests. And then the longest term they will generally do for any new model year, new model introduction, will be 6 months. And then that will get decreased to production plan of 3 months. And then that will then be decreased as the production solidifies and production planning solidifies to a 30-day rolling part procurement planning. That's done at the systemic level within Toyota procurement, generally speaking, at the factory. Then the factory gets pushed up to usually regional or countrywide procurement, and then that gets pushed out to all of the different suppliers. Okay. So what else we're seeing is also a localization of production. What I mean by localization of production obviously means that parts will, instead of belts being made by Mitsubishi, for example, let's say 9091602-353-83, which is the COG, which is the 2-belt V-belt setup for 1FC engines. So that part was historically made in Japan, sent to the United States, went to the dealer, sold to you, made in Japan. For a while, that part, because Toyota makes their suppliers compete against each other, that part was actually made in the United States by Mitsubishi. So by Mitsubishi's United States subsidiary, because they came in at cheaper than the Mitsubishi Japan. So Mitsubishi. So Toyota always has their suppliers compete against each other. Toyota will have long-term supplier relationships, but they will always make sure that the suppliers are competing against each other. So let's say for belts, you have Mitsubishi, you have Gates, you have Bando, which is another Japanese belt supplier. Toyota will have them competing against each other to see who can reduce the cost of the actual manufacturing cost of the part on any given production planning or procurement time period. And if that happens, check you later, Mitsubishi Japan, that part's going to be made regionalized in the United States. Of course, that factors into import-export, tariffs, any taxes that are paid on import-export, and transportation costs. All of that, the algorithms are very large for those types of things, very complicated, very complex. There isn't someone sitting there, being like, yeah, we paid $14.09. No, it's a lot of it is automated at this point. Yeah. And the automation is then fed to humans who then have that relationship with suppliers. So we are seeing parts now manufactured in Mexico, parts manufactured in Thailand, parts manufactured in Indonesia, Vietnam, China, obviously. Even Toyota is going China to have parts made. For example, recently, 82 121 603 43, which is the 1FC FE80 series engine harness. We've got reports of those being manufactured in Vietnam by Yazaki, which is the harness manufacturer, versus being made in Japan. So a lot of those changes are happening even at Toyota. So don't be surprised if you start seeing a lot of parts either becoming discontinued or being outsourced into other countries, versus your Land Cruiser owners love their Japanese parts. It's got to be made in Japan.
Right.
And I love that stuff as well too. But you have to realize that, like Denso making oil filters in Thailand is not a lesser oil filter. I mean, it's just as good as a Denso Japanese oil filter. Are the materials different? More than likely. Are they sourced differently? More than likely. But they still have to reach quality levels that have to be acceptable, both from manufacturing, engineering, procurement. I mean, multitude of layers. So, yeah, if I owned an older Land Cruiser, what I do for certain clients, for example, is they say, hey, owner, you know what? I've got a 1989 FJ62. I want to own it for the rest of my life. What should I do? We get on a parts procurement plan, basically a monthly plan where they usually give me a credit card number, and I go through the catalog and order parts for them based on what I know about how parts are going down the ladder towards supersession. And it's basically they're making an investment. And right now, parts is actually a pretty good investment, it seems.
Yeah.
Considering parts prices, people are making that investment and putting that part on a shelf to have available for the unforeseeable future that part becomes damaged or broken.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't get a front fender for an FJ60 or a 62 anymore new OEM. You can maybe NOS somewhere pops up on eBay for $4,322.
Right.
There's a lot of people on Instagram who sell NOS parts, from the Middle East, Southeast Asia. So, I mean, and parts are pay to play too. Like, there's nothing about Land Cruisers that is not pay to play.
Right.
And people get disappointed, like, oh man, that's so expensive. And I tell them, like, listen, a new part does not know it's going on a 40-year-old vehicle. A new part knows only one thing, that it's a new part and you're paying for a new part.
Yeah.
So, if I owned an older Land Cruiser, I'd be spending as much money as possible stockpiling parts.
That's what I took that advice early on from you. I started ordering parts when I, first met my wife and, met her FJ62. And, some of the interior trim pieces that were available at the time, I remember buying them, and they were relatively cheap. And then now they're at least, twice, 3 times the price new. It's amazing, even just in that 5-6 year time span, OEM prices have increased so much. So I know, it's kind of crazy to promote buy all the parts you can now, but it really does ring true. I mean, even though they're available, the prices are increasing too. It's crazy.
I mean, here's a great example: 90919-21557, which is the wire set, Yazaki wire set for a 1FZ engine in an 80 series. That wire set used to be, back when I first started working for Toyota, I believe, Cruiser Dan and I were selling those for like $120, $118 for the wire set. That wire set now, Toyota MSRP is over $200.
Exactly.
For a wire set. But amazingly enough, something like an H55 has only gone up about 3 or 4% in the 15 years I've been selling them, which is still very reasonable. Like, you can still get an H55 for online discounters or from current cruiser outfitters. You can still pick them up for $2,500, which is very reasonable for a cast iron badass 5-speed brand new transmission assembly. I mean, that's very reasonable considering that they last for 50 years. I mean, all things considered. So
someone asked, and I'm not sure how would people know which parts are likely to go discontinued first? I'm guessing this is just build a good relationship with your parts guy. Okay.
Yeah, there's no way a person who is looking in from the outside that does not have access to internal Toyota information, there's no way for them to know.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you need to develop a good relationship with whoever your parts, again, harkening back to the value of expertise is that that person knows what the call is.
Yeah.
There's no BSing about it. There's no anything about it. They know what the call is, and they never open their mouth unless they know what the call is. And that's the only way to know, really.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the way I know, is I have access to internal Toyota information.
Yeah. How wonderful it is.
Yeah. Hey,
All right.
Information is knowledge is power.
Yeah. All right. So maybe we'll step back from these heady questions, get into some easy, more fun questions. But
Sure.
this is probably maybe a hard one to any cruiser head. But if you could own one Land Cruiser or maybe two, which one would you pick?
I would definitely want a short wheelbase 70 series with a factory soft top. So that would be from the 80s and 90s or early mid 2000s, but those are factory soft tops are pretty much gone now, except for special builds that Toyota will do if a client will like ask for it. Usually a large order, and then a 105. Yeah, I want a wagon with heated seats, great dual mode AC. Yeah, but with a solid front axle. So yeah, short wheelbase, 70 series, factory soft top, and a 105. Third place would be a pickup of some sort.
Yeah.
45, or obviously a 75, 79.
Got to balance out the capabilities of.
Yeah.
There's too much diversity. It's hard to pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, someone like I'm always not jealous or envious, but I'm always like, man, dude's doing it right. Is someone like Nolan Grogan, who's got pickup, he's got wagons. I mean, it's like a he's got a nice setup going on.
Exactly. Choose the weapon from the quiver there, but.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a cruiser that got away that you sold or wish you should have bought it at the time, or if you just gotten the ones you wanted at the time? No regrets?
I mean, I had my FJ60 that I got from the old school Rice on the Rocks guys, Marty Boersma out in California. I really spent a lot of time, if you remember that thread that I had in the 60 series section back in the day, about 8 years ago or so. I think I started that thread and was buying everything available for a 2F engine, I think.
That was fun to watch.
Yeah. That vehicle was cool. I really liked my FJ60, but it went to a good home. It went to my friend in Austin, Texas, who actually then shipped it out to George at Valley Hybrids, and it's going to get a FT conversion. So it's still within my grouping of friends. So I'll get to see it, after it's been completed in its build. But no, I mean, I'm super attached to Land Cruisers, but I'm not so attached that I would not, if I had to, sell one for whatever reason. Again, in the grand scheme of things, it's a thing. It's an appliance. If I had to, based on life circumstance, I'd sell it if I had to, and I really wouldn't be sad about it. So, but no, I don't have any regrets or anything like that.
That's good.
Yeah.
I had a regret, but I bought it back, paid a price for it. But
yeah. Well, you're old 40, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was some crazy luck, but yeah. So let's see. Favorite Land Cruiser motor? Maybe that's just as bad of a question. I don't know.
Favorite Land Cruiser motor. My favorite. Okay, so let's be a little more specific. Favorite inline six gas Land Cruiser engine will obviously be a 1FZ-FE. Favorite diesel Land Cruiser engine inline six would be a 1HD FTE, obviously. Favorite Land Cruiser engine overall is a 2UZ FE.
Ah.
I mean, that engine really is probably one of the best engines Toyota has ever built, mainly because it did come from probably the best engine Toyota built, which was the 1UZ FE, which was in the LS400, the original LS400. Probably, I mean, the 2UZ is super easy to work on. It's super reliable. And I'm not talking from the point of view like, oh, it gets bad gas mileage, whatever. That's like, that's not even a consideration when I consider that. But a 2UZ FE is just a spectacularly well-designed engine. It was designed just a few years after the 1UZ was designed. So it's a product of the same time period. Obviously changed a bit in terms of displacement and torque curve and power band and stuff like that to be applicable to a truck application, but just a really, really spectacular engine, and I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I love it in the 100 series, and, you know, you can really feel the quality, and the power is great, which is, you know, funny coming from, you know, the FJ40 and FJ62, where they give you just enough horsepower to get by. This one actually feels like a good amount. So, yeah, it's a wonderful engine.
Yeah, oh man, that 3FE. I can't stand working on a 3FE. It's probably one of the most difficult engines to work on, especially the front section on either an 80 or a 62. They just cram so much. I want to like shoot the engineer who designed the 3FE for putting so many pulleys and brackets. Like getting that water pump off is insane sometimes. But anyway.
Well, that leads into my next question. I mean, it wasn't, you know, I'm not hunting for this answer, but, you know, most Land Cruiser engines are very well regarded. And, I mean, do you think there are some that get a bad rap, like the 3FE? Or do you believe there are some that are, you know, undervalued or overvalued, you know, for what they are? Or?
Undervalued, I think the 1HC is undervalued. People poo-poo that engine because it's low on power, but it's actually a super reliable engine. That engine was not made to go 80 miles an hour turboed on the American highways. It was made to go 30 to 50 miles an hour or even slower in the middle of Timbuktu, you know. I love the 1HC. I think it's a spectacular engine. The one engine that I think is just a piece of garbage that Toyota made, actually, it was made in conjunction with Toyota small engine manufacturer, which is Daihatsu, but the L series, 2LT, 2LTE, total garbage. I wouldn't, you'd have to pay me to even drive one. Yeah, the first thing any person who's got an LJ or something like that should do is pull that engine and shit can it and do an engine swap.
Putting it lightly, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your your favorite place that a Land Cruiser has taken you to date? Favorite adventure?
Doozy Ursham in my old 80 series, the Raisin that I had. Doozy Ursham is just a spectacular hardcore trail, just really, really phenomenal. I love that trail. I recommend it for anyone who really wants to challenge their vehicle and their own off-roading capabilities. Saline Valley, Death Valley, California. I love Saline Valley, and the Cruiser is the only way to go there. And Gray Mesa in southeastern Utah, which is on the Hole in the Rock Trail, which is on the eastern side of the Glen Canyon, Lake Powell, I guess, Colorado River. Love Gray Mesa, being able to go down into the Rincon, which is a ancient oxbow with a big tower in the middle, right on the lake. It's just so deserted and epic. Yeah, those are probably my three favorite places that Land Cruisers have taken me, and obviously to visit friends and you know. Yeah, I mean, that's always great too, rolling into friends and they got their Land Cruiser, you got yours, and it's kind of like, yo, what's up? It's always enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm with you there. All right, and I guess will that bring us to our last question? I've been talking for a while, so I'll let you go and get back to the 80 series, but that you're working on. So what do you think is one good tech tip that Land Cruiser owners should know, or if there's maybe a couple? maybe that's too generic for so many variants.
Yeah, there's just so much. When you start wrenching on Land Cruisers and spending a lot of time on Land Cruisers, there's just so much that you run into, both positively and negatively. You're like, oh, why did I do it that way? Or, damn, I wish I had done it that way. Or, wow, I'm glad I did it that way. I guess the one tech tip that I always keep in mind when I'm working on cruisers is, most importantly, I think, is clean your parts. People are very sloppy. Be meticulous, clean your parts, or whenever possible, use new parts. Use things like thread sealer, thread locker, gasket maker. Use all those types of tools available to you to get good adhesion of parts to assemblies, to make sure that your brake caliper doesn't fly off when you slam on the brakes because you forgot to apply a little bit of torque. Use torque ratings. Do the types of things that an engineer would do, or what Toyota employees would do when they're working and building your vehicle. Like, it's built to a very, very, very high standard. Keep that high standard when you're working on a Land Cruiser. Don't cut corners. Obviously, if you're on a trail, you break your knuckle studs and you got to get off the trail. Sure, you got to weld something, you have to cut something, grind something, you have to plug a hole up or do whatever. I'm not talking about extenuating circumstances. I'm talking about in general when you're doing maintenance or doing a build. Use the best possible products. I'm always blown away on mud. People like, oh yeah, I bought this and it broke in 2 days because it's a piece of shit Chinese part, because I didn't want to pay the 74 other cents that I could have paid to get the Toyota part. Like, that's insane that people will do something like that and like break things, or parts will fail, and they're like, oh man, and they come complaining about this broke or something because they either assembled it incorrectly or they used a subpar component. That just doesn't make sense when the Land Cruiser was built to super high engineering standards.
Yeah.
Keep with the ethos that was built into the vehicle. Remember, Land Cruiser equals quality QDR, quality, durability, reliability. That's literally the long and the short of that vehicle. That's literally the defining engineering product planning goal for Toyota, is to have the highest QDR available of any mass-produced vehicle, is the design goal of a Toyota Land Cruiser. It always has been, it always will be.
Yeah. And get a factory service manual.
Absolutely. Use good documentation. Obviously, there's a lot of places to get documentation, and there's a lot of lived experience. Like, for example, when I'm doing a knuckle job, I don't use a fish scale anymore. You feel it after you've done 1,000 knuckle jobs. It seems like I've done 1,000 knuckle jobs. You know what the torque rating is. You feel you feel the way it's supposed to feel because you've done it. Experience is important. Developing that experience when someone is working on their Land Cruiser, I think, is very important too. And always, reach out to experts, reach out to people. Call up your cruiser friends and find out if you're doing something right. Post up on I Hate Mud or something. No question's a bad question. No question's a dumb question. Everyone had to start. Everyone had to be a newbie someplace.
Right.
At some point, no one is born a Land Cruiser mechanic or a Land Cruiser parts expert or whatever. Everyone has to start someplace new.
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like I've taken up a lot of your time, and I don't have any more questions at this time. But I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and talk with us about your background in Toyota and Land Cruisers in general. And I hope you can come back on another time. We can continue this conversation, because I know Land Cruisers is just a depthless well of cool history and tech. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's just the tip of a very large iceberg.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Chase.
It's so fun.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a great time, and I really like what you're doing on your channel. I hope it grows, and you're a great representative of the Land Cruiser community, man.
Thank you. Well, it's a group effort, so we're all together, and it's such a wonderful community. So I'm really thankful for everyone that helps out, and mud and everything. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Be well, man.
All right, you too. Take
All
care.
right,
Thanks
take
everyone
care,
for
man.
watching. We'll save the video, so if anyone missed parts of it, you can go back and see it. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Owner, so much.
See ya. Take care, Chase.
Take care.